Hey, solos. So you're going to Walt Disney World all by yourself, or not. And you want to take yourself out on like a special kind of solo date to really celebrate how awesome you are. How might you go about doing that? Well, solo spoiler, whether you're going to be in the parks or not, you can use some Disney magic to really help create an awesome solo date. And solo dates are just such a wonderful way to reconnect with how awesome you are and how wonderful it is to solo travel to Disney World, or just solo travel to Disney World in your head. Hi everyone, it's Samantha. Olaf may not know who Samantha is, but now you do, and welcome to Disney Solo Magic, the #1 podcast for solo travel to Disney World. In this week's episode, I'm going to give you a little quiz, like in the back of a 17 magazine, to help you plan a really amazing solo date. And that solo date can be in the parks, but it can also be at home. But the quiz is going to be with some Disney magic, so you can tap into your own solo magic. It was really fun to come up with the quiz questions and then to kind of think of some scenarios. And yeah, I'm really kind of excited to share this with you. And then hopefully you'll share back with me your own kind of solo date ideas. I think that'd be really, really awesome. And if you want to get in touch with me, Instagram is the best way. Click the link below to get to Instagram as well as Facebook and Threads, but I am the most active on Instagram. You can also listen to this on Apple, on Spotify, and on YouTube, and all of those links are down below as well. If you want to support the podcast and keep it ad-free, you can buy me a coffee. You can buy me a coffee for my own solo date. That'd be really great. We could be solo dating together, but from afar. I don't know, does that work? So anyway, that link for buying me a coffee is down below as well. And that is a very easy little button on Apple Pay, click, click, click. And it's $3. And it's really a great way to invest in the podcast and support what I'm doing here. So thank you so much. All right. I feel like that was a short preamble, but let's just get into it. All right. So happy Valentine's Day and happy Galentine's Day for you gals listening as well. I love Valentine's Day. I love actually the month of February. I think I mentioned this in last week's episode. Valentine's Day, hearts everywhere, pink, red hearts everywhere, Black history, Black culture. It's a great month. I don't know. I really enjoy February. And I was so excited to have 2 episodes. So one this week before Valentine's Day and one next week after Valentine's Day that really kind of picked up on that Valentine's theme. And this one is about solo dates. Now, solo travel is, of course, a type of date, but I was thinking about really what a good date entails. Not I've had a lot of good dates in a while, but anyway, the idealized idea of a good date would entail. And it entails an activity. So a lot of times people will be like, oh, I don't know. A lot of times people will be like, I'm also referencing the 1950s, I think, in this example. I don't know what kids these days or old people these days are doing for dates, but you'll hear, going out for dinner and a movie is a really typical first date. But it's not really the movie that is the good part of the date. It's really, well, unless it is, if you know what I mean. It's really the conversation before and after and the way that you are getting connected with a person. So I think the good dates involve activities, but also moments of connection. And usually they involve food as well, because there's something about sharing food and drink that really help bring people together. And so I thought that having kind of those pillars of a good date, to have an activity that, you're organizing yourself around, to have food, and to even have explicit moments of connection would be a really great structure for thinking of a solo date as well. Because a solo date, just like a regular date with a person that you are romantically interested in, is about the intentionality of getting to know that other person, getting to know yourself, the intentionality of doing an activity, the intentionality of sharing food. It's really about that intentionality. And I think that solo travel is great, but that's not necessarily the same as a solo date. So you could go on a solo trip, but never take yourself out on a solo date. Or you could create a whole solo trip that is just a series of different solo dates. And I guess, again, I think the distinction between just going out for lunch by yourself and taking yourself out for a solo date that involves lunch is that notion of intentionality, the notion of creating memories, of getting to know yourself better, and that notion of like taking that time to really appreciate who you are and the future that you are building. And I think that those are the elements of a great solo date. It's not just, go for a walk. It's not just go out for lunch. It's not just go for a movie. It's not just walk around World Showcase. It's really about being intentional about these activities and the ways that you are coming to know and being intentional and thinking again about your future and connecting with yourself. So all of that is very heavy. I recognize that. And when I was thinking about this episode, I was like thinking about different types of solo dates you could do at Disney World. But then I was just like, this doesn't feel right, because what a good solo date for me might not be a good solo date for you. And that's not the point of this podcast. The point of this podcast is for you doing you, bibbidi bobbidi boo, like for you really tapping into the stuff that you really enjoy doing. But I recognize, again, as I've said so many times, that life can be so busy that maybe you don't even know what you really like to do. So I was like, quiz time. I'm kind of like obsessed with the idea of like creating a Disney Solo Magic like YM 17 magazine from like 1996. But I mean, like what are you going to do? Print it out? I mean, I don't know. That's kind of weird. Although it'd be really, really awesome for all of us to have like a big sleepover, and we can take all those magazines and like cut out and make collages and vision boards and try to get the songs that we want to get on our mixtape on the radio and All right, good times. So I have a 3-question quiz. Originally it was 5 questions, but it just felt very long and unwieldy, and I wanted to make sure that I had some examples. So it's just 3 questions now, and I'm going to give you some suggestions about what these solo dates could look like if you were at Disney World and if you were at home. All right, so get your pencils out, or your mental pencils. Question 1. Let's say you arrive at your Disney World resort and you discover that your fairy godmother has left you a magical voucher worth a few $100s to enjoy a bonus activity. How do you use it? A, you go on a spa treatment at the Grand Floridian. B, you do Savor the Savannah at Animal Kingdom. C, Premier Pass Lightning Lane, obviously, and you get to ride all the rides at one park. D, a day full of enchanting extras. Like, don't worry about the schedule either. You're going to do Sangria University. You're going to do yoga at Key West Resort, which, by the way, is a real thing and is actually free. You're going to do tie-dye. You're going to do mosaic. You're going to do painting. You're going to do all the enchanting extras. And E, a meal at Victoria and Albert, the super fancy, almost Michelin star restaurant at the Grand Floridian. So which one are you going to pick? What is that fairy godmother magical voucher going to be used for? A spa treatment, Savor the Savannah, Premier Pass Lightning Lane, a day full of enchanting extras, and a meal at Victoria and Albert's. All right, let's go over to question 2, and then we'll take it all up together. Question 2, if your perfect meal was inspired by Disney magic, which feast would you choose? A, a grand banquet, obviously, like Be Our Guest. B, a handmade pie, like Snow White's gooseberry pie that she made for Grumpy. C, a very simple meal like Mulan's rice and bacon, but the bacon is really just added in for Americans, just really simple and basic. D, a honey pot indulgence like Winnie the Pooh, just like all honey all the time. I eat so much honey I can't even get it in my house type of gorging indulgence fest. Or E, Mirabelle's mom, comforting, magical, homemade arepas. What are you choosing? Grand banquet, homemade pie, very simple meal, honey pot indulgence, or homemade arepas? All right, question 3. Disney characters often reflect on their lives in meaningful ways, dreaming, planning, and striving to become more true to themselves. And this point of connection with themselves and others, but with themselves primarily, is an important element of character arcs in so many Disney movies. And so what is the approach to getting to know yourself that most appeals to you? A, doing art like Rapunzel. B, being curious about other ways of life like Ariel. C, problem solving like Mulan on that big pole with the heavy weights during training, be a man, like that part. Oh, I just realized I haven't sang it all in this episode. You're very lucky. You're welcome. D, really animating your dreams and taking them very seriously, like Aurora, like Sleeping Beauty when she's dancing with her friends in the forest about these dreams that she's having. Or E, go on an adventure and just push beyond the horizon like Moana. Which one most appeals to you as an activity that really would help connect with yourself, to be very introspective about your life? Doing art like Rapunzel, being curious about other ways of life like Ariel, problem solving like Mulan, animating your dreams, taking seriously your dreams like Aurora, or going an adventure and pushing beyond your limits like Moana. All right, so you have your answers. I'm very intrigued what people are going to pick. I kind of think that everyone is going to pick very similar things, but I don't know for certain. And you want to know something? I actually haven't even taken this myself. So even though I have like a ton of notes and a ton of like very interesting ideas, I haven't really thought of it myself. Maybe I'll take it. Yeah, go on Instagram. The link is below. I will take the quiz myself, and then I'll let you know what my answers are on Instagram later this week. Like maybe on Valentine's Day or Galentine's Day or whatever. Anyway, go to Instagram. The link is below. Okay, so let's go back to your answers though. If you have your magical voucher from a fairy godmother and you were really attracted to the idea of spa treatments and you're at Disney World, then obviously go and do a spa treatment. At Grand Floridian, the Grand Floridian has a spa. A lot of Coronado used to have massage services. A lot of the other spa type services around the Disney resorts or at the Disney resorts have closed down. It has not opened up after COVID. So Grand Floridian is the only main spa. The Swan and Dolphin also has a spa that I used 14 years ago, and I very much enjoyed it. Actually, it was the only time I fell asleep in a massage. It was great. I also know that the Four Seasons Spa is really amazing. And actually, I had a conversation with a solo on Facebook about the different spas. And then I bumped into this woman at Epcot. And she's it was funny because we're just kind of standing there and I'm eating an ice cream and we're just kind of making small talk. And she's like, oh, yeah, well, on this trip, I've already been to the spa, but blah, 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 blah. Now I have to get another, whatever. She just mentioned that she went to the spa. And I was like, the spa, huh? What spa? And she's like, the Four Seasons Spa. And I said, is it your first time? And she said, yeah. I'm like, are you on the Disney Solo Facebook group? She's like, yeah. I was like, I'm the one that told you to go to these different spas. It was a really wonderful and funny connection. So there is that spa as well. Now, if those actual spas are not in your budget, then you can also make your hotel room having a spa day in your hotel room or a spa evening, for example. You could bring with you from home a face mask and feet masks and maybe a bubble bath and really have kind of an indulgent spa experience from your hotel room. Doing a face mask and having eucalyptus cream on your feet at the end of a day, and yet you're still staying at All-Star Sports makes that very high class and very wonderful, solo date type magic. So you can bring some of that spa energy even if going to a spa is not in your budget. If you're at home, then you can do a similar thing, right? You can go to a spa and get a massage and do the steam room and sauna and all that stuff. You can also just go and get your nails done, for example, get a manicure and a pedicure. But you can also make a really luxurious type spa experience at home. Maybe it involves a bubble bath. Maybe it involves, again, a face mask, but also just maybe it involves sitting in a quiet room with just spa music and maybe, again, a eucalyptus smell or a lavender smell to really just kind of zen you out. So if a spa was what you gravitated towards, then that one's kind of easy. If you gravitated towards Savor the Savannah and Savor the Savannah is in your budget and you're at Disney World, then go do Savor the Savannah. I picked Savor the Savannah over something like Wild Africa Trek because to me, I think that the Savor the Savannah experience, because it is a little bit slower than Wild Africa Trek, it involves a lot more food, involves some sort of learning because you will get to talk with some of the keepers, although that's the case with Wild Africa Trek too. But there is something really about having a very big sensory experiential experience, a learning experience that I think gets really picked up on Savor the Savannah. And so again, if you have the budget and you're at Disney World, that's a great thing to do. If that's not your budget, that's totally okay. You could, if you wanted to, for example, on your solo date, do the Caring for Giants or the Meet the Rhinos ones that are much, much more affordable. Or you could just do the walk around all the different trails, or even just the Kilimanjaro Safari itself. But then add an extra element about asking questions, reading all the information on the trails, for example, so that you really get to not only experience it, but learn from it. If you're at home, you can also do something like go to a zoo if you want, but you could also just see if there's nature trails in your area and do kind of a blend of nature trails and maybe looking for local based food or seasonal food to really have that kind of all around sensory experience, taste, smell, sights, all that stuff, and then learn from it. So I think there's a lot of really cool things you can do as well. If Premier Pass Lightning Lane was what you would do with that extra money, I mean, if you had that extra money, I guess you could still do that. Oh gosh, again, I don't like to complain about a lot of things, but I really don't like that. Obviously, you can do that if you have the budget, but you could also just do lightning lanes, or you could try to strategize a time if you're at Disney World to go during a time when it's not so busy, or even just challenge yourself with not necessarily riding all the rides, but could I do something like 4 parks in one day and ride one ride per park? You could give yourself a challenge to get that adrenaline up. I think that if you chose the Premier Pass Lightning Lane, you are interested in that kind of adrenaline that all the rides bring. So see what you can do. Challenge yourself in different ways to, again, get that adrenaline up. And that doesn't necessarily involve spending hundreds of dollars on Premier Pass Lightning Lane as much as it might involve just thinking of other ways to enjoy the parks in a more challenging way. If you're at home and you want to get that adrenaline up, you can do something like go-karting or go to a batting cage or do something that, again, gets that adrenaline up, kind of pushes you out of your comfort zone in a challenging way. If this is what you're attracted to, that's awesome. Please tell me what you've decided, because I can't think of any other excitement, or I can't think of any other activities for this one. Getting my adrenaline up is just not not a central value of my life. If you chose a day full of enchanting extras like Sangria University and yoga and painting and Savor the Savannah and Keys to the Kingdom and all of that, what I think you're really interested in is learning and doing and activities. And so if you are able and you're at Disney World, then see if there are some enchanting extras that you could do as part of your solo date. All the enchanting extras have an additional cost to them, but a lot of the enchanting extras are also at resorts, not necessarily at the parks. And if you're not going to the parks during the day, you might kind of save money by not getting a ticket that day. I've done a couple different episodes on resort activities, enchanting extras in the parks, enchanting extras at the resorts. And you can go back to these episodes to get some ideas. If you pick this and your solo date's going to be at home, then maybe you want to do something like take a class, learn something new, do an activity, pick up a new hobby, pick up a new art and craft, pick up new arts and crafts to do. Yep, I think that works a little bit better. If you have the funds for it, you could actually go and do a class. And otherwise, if you don't, that's totally fine. Obviously, you can find a lot of really cool videos that cover a wide range of different things and see what you can do kind of on the cheap. That might be an interesting challenge in and of itself. Around October, I saw this video about making ghosts out of clay, Crayola air dry clay. And I was watching this woman do it and I was like, I can do that. yeah, I can make a ghost. So I went and I got some Crayola air dry clay, and I got the like little jars and the ping pong balls that you need to like craft the ghost. And I just made like a whole bunch of ghosts during the fall. It was really fun, actually. Maybe I'll post a picture of my little ghosts. And like the financial investment was not that much. I was able to get air dried clay at Walmart for $10, and I got some other supplies at the dollar store, which was another $10 at the very most. And here I am with all these ghosts like all around my house. But I was so interested in the idea of like working with clay that I actually did find a place that had a one afternoon class, and you got to do hand building and you got to use a pottery wheel as well. And it was really cool to be able to try something new. So there you go. That could be a solo date as well. If you picked a meal at Victoria and Albert's, then maybe what you want to do on your solo date is to really indulge. Well, it's not even indulge, like really appreciate food as a whole experience. And so if you're at Walt Disney World, maybe you want to go to Victoria and Albert's. I know that there are solos that have done that, but maybe you just want to go to a restaurant that you've never tried before, or eat something that you've never tried before at like one of the festivals, for example. The experience is in the art of the food, not just like Festival of the Arts of the food, but the art of putting together the different flavors and the different visuals. And you can do that with, like I said, the small plates from the different food festivals, and really just kind of be conscious about the artfulness of it. Again, that's the thing with these solo dates. It's really just about being conscious of what you want to pull from these experiences. If you're at home, you can take yourself out for a fancy dinner as well. Like, see what the most fancy restaurant there is in your neighborhood and give it a shot. Maybe you want to do takeout. Maybe you want to be able to like try something at home. Maybe you want to do some cooking. Like you want to try some like, gastronomique type different techniques at home. Like there's so many things that you could do if that was what you were drawn to. So that's pretty exciting. And speaking of food, what type of food should you have at your solo date? So I gave you a couple different options. The first is a grand banquet at like a la Be Our Guest. Be Our Guest. And of course, there are some delicious, wonderful buffets all around Walt Disney World if your solo date is going to be at Disney World. Two of my favorite buffets, like surprising favorite buffets, is Hollywood and Vine at Hollywood Studios. I don't know, I'm always like very pleasantly surprised by the food there, and it's a character dining. And also Tusker House, which is also character dining at Animal Kingdom. If that is appealing to you, like the food at Tusker House that has some kind of different Middle Eastern African spices to it, then there's also Boma, which is a buffet at Animal Kingdom Lodge. It's not character dining, but it has really good food, and you don't need park admission, and you can still see animals. If you're at home, then of course you have your whole neighborhood to like find something great to indulge in. Again, like maybe you order takeout and you just like order all the appetizers from a restaurant because you're just gonna try them all. Or maybe you go to a buffet, or maybe your buffet is like all candy and you're gonna create it at home. Like there's so many ways that you can be really creative if you wanted just like a lot of really delicious food. So you can try that when you're at home. If you said a handmade like gooseberry pie from Snow White is the type of food that you gravitate towards, then I mean, unfortunately, like locally grown, etc., food is not like the main thing at Disney. Because they're dealing with like mass stuff. However, note that the food that's in the greenhouses at Living with the Land is actually part of the food that's at Garden Grill. So if you wanted to like really taste very local food, you could go to Garden Grill at Epcot in the Land Pavilion and eat the food from the Land Pavilion, like eat the stuff that is growing from the Land Pavilion. There's also a really good salad at Nomad's Lounge that also uses the lettuce from the greenhouse, which is pretty cool. At Disney Springs, however, there are a few restaurants that are like Florida-based and try to source locally as much as they can. I'm thinking of Everglaze, Yeah, Everglazed as one of them, and even Homecoming to an extent. So even though it's not going to be like high quality, artisanal, local, homemade food, you can still kind of be active in like looking for menu items that connect with Florida. You can also, if really, when I said gooseberry pie, you were like, yes. You can also just do the character dining, like the Snow White character dining at Wilderness Lodge that has a gooseberry tart as one of the desserts. And that's a favorite. That is a favorite restaurant for a lot of people. So it's not all local. But if you really just wanted gooseberry pie, that is one way to get it. If you're at home, however, your solo date can bring a lot more local, artisanal, homemade food. And you can go out of your way to search for this and look for it and make that a huge part of your date. Or you could just like have a really good slice of pie at a local bakery. So it's up to you how you might want to do that. Another way you might want to do that is to find what is seasonal and local to your area and then bake your own pie or, make your own food related to like a chutney or I don't know, whatever. But you could be the locally grown, artisanal, handmade type of person and use what is seasonal and local in your area to make that. So that's an option. If you really just liked Mulan's like rice and bacon, like if you're just like food isn't really the thing for me, then at Disney there is a lot of just like basic food. And so go get your fries. Go get your fries. I don't know if I've ever had like really delicious fries at Disney. There's a lot of delicious things that I've eaten, but fries isn't one of them. But I guess I don't go out of my way to eat fries. But if, food's not your thing, like, and you just need some basics, then the world is your oyster or chicken nugget. But actually, when I said rice and bacon, you were really like, yeah, no, I would really like some Chinese food. Then, of course, you can go to the China Pavilion at Epcot. And there's also the Japan Pavilion at Epcot, which is not the same country, obviously, but has very rice-based food. And then there's also the really delicious Indian restaurant at Disney Springs now. And that is curry and rice. And that'd be pretty good, too. If you're at home, then just get your basics. Like, what are the stuff, like what are the basics that you like? What are your staples? And just make sure that you have those on hand for your solo date. If you like the Honey Pot Indulgence from Winnie the Pooh and you were at Disney, then make sure you go to Main Street Confectionery or like the Candy Cauldron at Disney Springs. Like, make sure you just indulge. Get that giant ice cream, whatever. Get that candy apple. Get that Rice Krispie square. Like, there might not be a lot of like local artisanal food, but there is a lot of things to indulge. So just indulge and enjoy it. And the same if you are at home. If this is part of your solo date, then you just do the type of indulging that you want. Like, you just eat as much honey that you want that you can't even fit out the door. Like, you just do you and have that as a key part of your solo date. And don't worry about things like calories. Don't worry about all of that. Like, try to put that aside and really just appreciate the indulgent nature of the food during your solo date. And if you just want something comforting and homemade like the arepas and Encanto, then for Americans especially, there's a lot of really good like American basics all around Disney World. So like as a Canadian, chicken and waffles is not really like a key, like food when I think of Canadian food, but I do think of it as an American food. So for you Americans, if you're like, yeah, I just really want like homemade flavors, homemade food, then look for the things on different menus that really kind of connect you with your home-based like culinary palate. And if you're not American, if you are from another country, then maybe you find that with something like fish and chips at the England Pavilion at Epcot or at Raglan Road at Disney Springs. Maybe you want to like try the jerk chicken at the Caribbean Beach Resort, for example, if those are the types of flavors that really remind you of home. Disney has so many different types of foods all around Disney World that you can really find something that would remind you of your kind of family stories. If you're at home and you want homemade food, then maybe part of your solo date involves cooking. Or maybe really what you're interested in is other people's type of homemade food. So there's some really cool recipes out there for arepas, for example, if you wanted to try and make that at home. Again, think of how this could blend with the activity that you were interested in doing that was suggested by the first question. And then think about how that might connect with your solo date for this homemade food or any of the types of food I talked about. All right, lastly, so again, I think that a good date really involves an intentionality about coming to know each other, getting to know each other, maybe planning for the future, like having something that kind of opens up the idea that maybe you'll see each other again because you've learned something about each other that you want to get to know more. So I think that you need to be intentional about your solo date. And so yes, we picked activities, we picked food, but really, how are you going to think about and meditate on who you are and how magical you are and what you want from the future, or maybe just like when your next Disney vacation is. And so if you thought that really what kind of connected with you the most was Rapunzel doing art, then go do some art. Go do some art, go make some art. Of course, you're at Disney World, you can do those enchanting extras, of course, but maybe the art that you're doing is photography, or maybe it's writing, right? Like maybe you are going to write a little poem because you are standing at Magic Kingdom and you're looking at the castle and you're like, I just feel like creating art right now. I feel like writing a poem. Maybe the art is in how you put your outfit together and how you present yourself to the world. So when you're going around Disney during your solo date and you're wearing this outfit that you artfully put together, you can really think about how you show up in the world and how you want to show up in the world. If you're at home, then of course you can do all those same things with art. You can create your own art. You can do photography. You can wear something, different or outlandish or something that tells a different story about who you are. But the idea is whatever you're engaging in, you're being thoughtful about how you're learning something new about yourself. And maybe that involves like watching a class, right? Like doing the activity involves watching a class that is an artful class about a new type of art that maybe you didn't get to explore when you were a kid or something. Then you really wanted to like kind of get into that. So there's so many ways that you can pick up on this artful nature. And thinking of Disney as an inspiration is so inspirational because there are so many different kind of artful ways to bring up the type of storytelling that Disney does. And I feel like the last couple episodes have really, really talked about that. So there's so much potential there to use that explicitly and intentionally during your solo date. If you thought that like learning about yourself would happen, or like the idea of learning about one's self would happen in really good ways, like Ariel in The Little Mermaid when she's curious about finding out about other people, and you're at Walt Disney World, then there are a lot of ways that you can do that. There is so much. I mean, gosh, again, thinking about last week's episode about like Black history and culture that you can learn about throughout the parks. There's so many different things that are in the parks that Imagineers have brought in to it's not just like the surface level of things that you can see, but it's those like meta narrative, meta details that really allow you to like go. That's why you feel so immersive at Disney, because of these meta details. So if you were curious about other people like Ariel is, then you can be curious about all these different kind of secrets throughout Walt Disney World that will tell you more about Imagineering or about the history of that ride or the history of those stories. You could also learn about other cultures by like walking around Epcot, walking around World Showcase, learning all those different things. You could go and immerse yourself in like Star Wars land, about what type of details really tell you about this culture and about this world. Like, again, just being intentional about that and then reflecting back on yourself. What does learning about these others help me understand about myself? If your solo date is going to be at home, then go to a new neighborhood. Like, go to a different neighborhood, go to a different town, and just kind of see similarities and differences and what you can learn about, again, about yourself because of engaging with people and experiences that are a little bit different than yours. You can also do this, of course, virtually. You can research a country online. I love to do virtual walks. You can do a virtual walk and like really understand a neighborhood on the other side of the world through like watching somebody else walk through this country. You can also learn about other people by listening to music, watching movies, reading books. Like there's so many ways to learn about people. And again, being really intentional about what is helping you learn about yourself can just really elevate a solo date. If you think that Mulan problem solving, like going up that big pole, is a really good way to get to know yourself and to know your strengths and weaknesses, then set up opportunities for you to problem solve during your solo date. And maybe the problem solving you're doing if you're at Walt Disney World is like, how do you get from one resort to another? Like maybe you give yourself a challenge of like going to 3 or 4 different resorts in one day, eating something at a different restaurant at, each one of those, and strategizing the most efficient way to get between them. Now, that might sound really dull to you, but just thinking about that, I'm just like, ooh, that sounds like a fun day. Wow, that might tell me a lot. That might tell you a lot about me. But then there's also other ways to problem solve, right? Like you can problem solve like ride and wait times. And again, it's not that there is a problem. It is that you are being creative about situations. I don't know. Like I don't want to frame it as that you need to create a problem, but I want to frame it as something that you are doing and learning through having to do that kind of solving. Maybe you get like a book on hidden Mickeys and you start looking for hidden Mickeys around the different parks. I know that is less popular than it was like 10, 15 years ago, but you can still do it. You could also just like give yourself a scavenger hunt to look for different things. I don't know, this sounds kind of fun, actually. If you're at home, you can also problem solve. Don't problem solve like things like Amazon subscriptions. Like, don't problem solve like actual problems that you have in your life. But again, just kind of create situations that you're kind of challenged about. Rock climbing is a really good example for that, right? Like if you were interested in doing like an indoor rock climbing wall as part of your solo date because you like adrenaline, that also allows you to problem solve because of the nature of like going up the wall or whatever. And so again, it's being intentional then about learning about yourself. So I like to hike in my neighborhood. So even though I live in Toronto, we live in a very large ravine system and there's a lot of really great hiking trails. And there's this one secret hiking trail that I have found. And I really like it because I actually have to be a lot more physical. I have to like climb up on things. I have to do this. And one day when I was doing one of those hikes, I realized that the reason why I like hiking so much is that I'm problem solving with my body that I think is a kind of a cool way of coming to like, I don't know, understand the space. And that's not necessarily the way I engage in my life regularly. So here's an example of like problem solving, even though it isn't like a Rubik's Cube, If you found inspiration from Sleeping Beauty, from Aurora, who like went out to the field and was like, I literally dreamed about this last night and I want to bring that dream to life. Now, I don't know about you. I have some crazy dreams sometimes. I probably wouldn't actually want to animate an actual dream, but there are other ways to like be part of that fantasy of your life. And if you're at Walt Disney World, of course, there are so many ways to do it. Disney bounding, character dining, just being at Disney itself. But again, it's connecting with that dream and why it's important for you. And as Gloria Steinem, famous feminist, said, dreaming is a form of planning. So once you put yourself in your dreams and you animate them, then you start planning for maybe what a future could look like. If you're at home, maybe this might feel a little bit more challenging, but that doesn't mean that you still can't kind of explore what that would look like. It could even just be a little bit of a writing project, right? You are going for a fancy dinner as part of your solo date, and then you start making a list of like, in 5 years, this is these are the types of ways that I want to feel when I come into my home. And, I know, especially in the States right now, but Canada too, the atmosphere is not that of like really positive dreaming, especially for a lot of people who have traditionally been marginalized feel like they're going to be marginalized even more, and there's certainly legislation that is happening that is making that so it might actually feel very difficult to dream a world and kind of animate that. But also like that might what that animation of your dreams might look like if you're at home is about building community, about investing in your community, about seeing the ways that you can support those who continue to be marginalized. Like when I say dreams, I don't just mean like a fancy car. I mean other types of dreams. And so again, they're your dreams. What might it look like to animate them, to kind of put them into practice? If you're at home or at Disney World, of course, it's so much easier to live in a dream at Disney World. If you are really interested in pushing beyond the horizon like Moana as part of your solo date, then push beyond the horizon. Like, what is something that you did not think that you would ever do solo at Walt Disney World? And then maybe as part of your solo date, you do that. Or maybe you don't even do that. You just think about doing it. You just kind of like stand outside the thing and think about doing it. Maybe part of that is really just kind of envisioning what that going beyond would look like, right? Like Moana spent a lot of time thinking about it before she actually got beyond that barrier reef. And so, I mean, see what you can do just to push beyond. Even if like you normally do quick service restaurants, for example, because you are kind of like a little anxious about eating alone in a formal restaurant. Well, maybe one of the ways that you push beyond your horizons is sitting in a formal dining room at one of the restaurants at Disney. Maybe pushing beyond the horizons is like walking over alligators on Wild Africa Trek on a big bridge. Like there are a lot of different ways that you can push beyond your horizon. If you're at home, there are ways too, but I don't know what your home looks like. I don't know what that would look like for you. What would it look like for you? What would it look like to just push beyond your boundaries just a little bit? And what would that teach you about yourself? All right, Solo. So those are the 3 questions. Now, even though I kind of described all the answers separately, I really want you to think about them together, like to think and be creative about what they might look like when placed together. So, for example, let's say for the quiz, you picked that you were the most interested in like the Premier Pass Lightning Lane type of experience from your fairy godmother. For the food, you're not that like into food, so you were just like, yeah, the Mulan rice, that's totally fine. And then for reflection and connection, you picked be curious about other ways of life like Ariel. So maybe what you want to do, so you had the adrenaline, you have kind of basic food, and then you have curiosity about other ways of life, is that maybe what you try to do is do 4 parks in one day. You don't really care about food, but you are curious about other ways of life. So when you do 4 parks in one day, you not only want to ride at least one ride in all of those parks, you got to get your adrenaline in, but you also want to go find something like basic, like fries, for example, and try that at one in every park, or even just like a potato treatment, like what potatoes would be like in Pandora versus Sunset Boulevard versus Magic Kingdom or Fantasyland versus Germany. Like, you're finding kind of the same thing, something basic like a potato, and then trying that at the different parks. Like that's part of your challenge. If you're at home and you also chose those same things, then maybe you want to do something like go-karting, but because you're curious about other ways of life, then maybe you actually like look up a go-karting track that isn't too far from you that has kind of different experiences. At my book club the other night, these women were talking about taking their son to this go-kart track about an hour away from me, and it has like a foam pit and it's like open like 24 hours a day. I mean, it sounds terrible, but like if you're into that, you're into that. And because you pick basic kind of food, you aren't super worried about food. You get some pizza on the way up. Maybe you try a different like pizza place than you've never had before. And there you go. You have an adrenaline type of experience. You're going to go to a different neighborhood. You're going to be curious about what that might be. You're going to think about how it is similar or different than your kind of expectations of a go-kart track. And you're going to find some pizza along the way. That sounds like a really fun solo date, if one was interested in go-karting. If you picked for your solo date a meal at Victoria and Albert, so something your fairy godmother was able to bestow for you, a honey pot indulgence like Winnie the Pooh for the type of food, and then for the type of reflection and connection moment, you really were attracted to the idea of like Aurora animating her dreams out in the forest. So if you're at Disney World, I mean, you could go to Victoria and Albert, but let's say you had a more, moderate, realistic budget. Maybe what a fun thing to do would be to go around World Showcase because you really want indulgent things. You go around World Showcase and you try a dessert from every single one of those countries. You might want to get the fanciest dessert as a way to kind of boost up that indulgence like you would get at Victoria and Albert's. And also because you are eating desserts, indulgent desserts at all the different countries, and you're going to need to burn off some of that sugar because you're going to be wired by the time you get to like America. So just do halfway around World Showcase. Then maybe what you do as a way to kind of animate your dreams is when you are in the different countries around World Showcase, like you could do something like do a little photo shoot as if you were living in that country, but also maybe you just want to take some time to sit in each one of the country pavilions and kind of think about who you might be if you were living in a different country, who you might like the type of career you might gravitate towards if you were living in this country, the type of opportunities that would have been available to you or would be available to you. Like maybe you just take the opportunity to really think about another life, a dream life in different countries. And that could really help you think about the ways that you have maybe a really great life or the things you might want to pivot in your life to bring some other qualities to the forefront. If you pick those same things and your solo date was going to be at home, maybe what you want to do actually is to make some really delicious, indulgent chocolates at home. And really like you can watch a video about how to make some different kind of chocolate blends and see if you can make some like fancy type of indulgence still, like lots of indulgent chocolate, but see if you can make some kind of interesting ones, like the type of, molecular gastronomy and like fancy Michelin star treatments and flavor combinations that you might get at Victoria and Albert's. And maybe dreaming about being able to go to a restaurant like that is part of the types of ways that you're going to animate your dreams. And so maybe what you're doing when you're preparing all of your chocolates is to think about what it might be like to go to one of these restaurants or put different combinations together. And maybe that becomes part of the activity itself, like really pushing the boundaries of what your own flavor profile could be like. And yeah, I don't know, that sounds like a really fun thing too. Gosh, I should just keep coming up with like suggestions and then just taking myself on solo dates every day. There wouldn't be many podcast episodes or deadlines I get to meet, but it would be a lot of fun and I'd get to know myself really well. And that's awesome because I'm one of the most awesome people. No, I am the most awesome person I know. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this episode. It's a long one, but I hope I gave you a lot of different suggestions. Think about what it might be like for you to put that together. And like I said, I have thought of a lot of different things. I'm certainly not going to go-karting, but I'm going to just kind of sit down separate from creating content for the podcast and like actually do the 3-question quiz myself. And I'm going to see what I come up with and let you know later in the week. And I'll take myself out on my own solo date. Let me know what you have decided to do. I can't wait. All right, until next week, solos. Bye. Hey Solos, it's Samantha. I hope you like this episode and all the episodes of Disney Solo Magic, the number one and I think only podcast for solo travel to Disney World. Help me make this podcast even bigger. Please make sure you rate, review, subscribe on Apple, Spotify, and on YouTube. You can do all three. That's really great. It's also really, really great to connect with you, and you can connect with me on Instagram, Facebook, and Threads. Instagram is the best way to get in touch with me. And if you want to support the podcast even more and keep it ad-free, you can buy me a coffee. You can go to buymeacoffee.com/Disney_solo_magic. And for the low price of $3 American, which is about $5 Canadian, and it's hard to even find a coffee at that price these days, you can support me and the podcast and help keep me caffeinated for a week ahead of content creation and editing. Thank you all so much for listening. It is just wonderful to build this community, and I can't wait to create more content for you. Bye.